In the soft glow of history's distant candlelight, we explore the shadowy figure of Matthew Hopkins, the self-styled Witchfinder General of 17th century England. As you settle into relaxation, consider liking and subscribing, and share your thoughts on how fear shaped societies of the past in the comments below. Part 1. Early life and historical context. In the early 17th century, England found itself embroiled in a tumultuous period of religious and political upheaval. The English Civil War raged on, pitting royalists against parliamentarians, while the country was steeped in a climate of fear and suspicion. It was in this unsettled climate that Matthew Hopkins emerged, a figure destined to carve a notorious legacy in the annals of history. Born around 1620 in Suffolk, Hopkins's life was as brief as the witch-hunting fervor he helped ignite, ending in 1647 when he was only 27 years old. He grew up in a world where the lines between the natural and the supernatural were often blurred, and whispers of witchcraft were never far from earshot. The societal tension of the time created fertile ground for superstition to thrive, as communities sought explanations for the misfortunes that plagued their daily lives. Within this narrow span of years, both Hopkins's career and the hysteria he fueled burned brightly but briefly, leaving a lasting imprint on England's troubled history. Matthew Hopkins was the son of a Puritan clergyman, a detail that may have influenced his later zealotry. The Puritans were known for their strict adherence to religious doctrine and their belief in the devil's active role in the world, which no doubt colored Hopkins' perceptions. Growing up in Great Wenham, Suffolk, he would have been exposed to sermons warning of eternal damnation and the ever-present threat of malevolent forces. Such teachings were common in a time when religious fervor ran high, and the fear of witchcraft was often intertwined with the fear of heresy. This religious backdrop likely shaped Hopkins' outlook, setting the stage for his future as a witch hunter. The period was marked by a heightened fear of witches, fueled by both folklore and real-life events. Witch trials were not uncommon in England, but they were usually sporadic and less intense than those on the continent. However, the English Civil War exacerbated these fears, as chaos and uncertainty gripped the nation. People sought scapegoats for their troubles, and witches became convenient targets. This atmosphere of paranoia and blame would provide the perfect opportunity for Hopkins to rise to prominence, exploiting these fears for his own gain. It was a time when the old and the new clashed, and Hopkins positioned himself as an arbiter of divine justice. Hopkins' methods were both innovative and ruthless, reflecting the desperate times in which he operated. He introduced techniques such as the infamous swimming test, where the accused were bound and thrown into water to see if they would float, a supposed sign of witchcraft. These practices, though brutal, were embraced by communities eager for resolution to their fears. Hopkins traveled from town to town, offering his services as a Witchfinder General, a title he adopted himself, and charging fees for his work. His reputation spread quickly, as did the fear he instilled, leading to a wave of accusations and executions that left a dark mark on history. Despite his grim legacy, Hopkins' life remains shrouded in mystery, with many details lost to time. What is known is that he operated primarily in East Anglia, a region particularly susceptible to witch hysteria during the war. His campaign lasted only a few short years, from 1644 to 1647, Yet in that time, he was responsible for more executions than had occurred in the previous century in England. The sheer scale of his operations, combined with the dubious nature of his methods, cemented his place as a figure of infamy. As the political landscape shifted and the war drew to a close, so too did the appetite for witch hunts, leading to Hopkins' eventual disappearance from historical records. The story of Matthew Hopkins is a chilling reminder of the power of fear and superstition. His actions were a product of his time, a reflection of a society grappling with uncertainty and seeking control in a world that seemed to be spiraling out of order. The legacy of the Witchfinder General serves as a cautionary tale, illustrating how quickly reason can be overshadowed by panic and how easily justice can be subverted by those who wield it unscrupulously. As history moved forward, the lessons of Hopkins' era would linger, a somber testament to the darker corners of human nature. Amidst the backdrop of the English Civil War, the societal landscape was a patchwork of fear and suspicion. Communities were on edge, their lives disrupted by the chaos of war and the ever-present spectre of witchcraft. Superstition thrived in this environment, where unexplained misfortunes often found their scapegoats in the form of supposed witches. The fear of the supernatural was deeply embedded in the collective psyche, fueled by tales of dark forces and malevolent spirits. This era of uncertainty created fertile ground for individuals like Matthew Hopkins, who capitalized on the pervasive dread to assert authority and control. His emergence as a self-proclaimed Witchfinder General was not just a product of personal ambition, but also a reflection of the tumultuous times. The harsh realities of war exacerbated existing tensions, amplifying the fear of witchcraft across the land. As communities grappled with the disruptions caused by conflict, they became more susceptible to the allure of simple explanations for their suffering. Witches, in this context, were seen as agents of chaos, wielding dark powers to bring about ruin and misfortune. The puritanical influence in regions like East Anglia further intensified these fears, as religious fervor painted the world in stark contrasts of good versus evil. Hopkins, with his Puritan background, found himself well positioned to exploit these beliefs, presenting himself as a defender of the righteous against the forces of darkness. His methods, though brutal, resonated with those desperate for stability and certainty in an uncertain world. Hopkins' campaigns were marked by a chilling efficiency as he traveled from town to town, leaving a trail of fear and death in his wake. His notorious swimming test, along with other harsh interrogation techniques, were justified as necessary measures to root out the evil lurking within communities. These practices, however, often relied on dubious evidence and coerced confessions, casting a shadow over their legitimacy. Yet, in a society gripped by panic, such methods found acceptance among those eager to see justice served. Hopkins' ability to convince communities of his authority and expertise allowed him to operate with impunity, turning his grim work into a lucrative enterprise. The fees he charged for his services underscored the transactional nature of his witch hunts, where fear and profit intertwined. The impact of Hopkins' witch hunts was profound, leaving a lasting scar on the regions he targeted. The sheer number of accusations and executions during his short campaign surpassed those of previous decades. a testament to the climate of hysteria he helped cultivate. Families were torn apart, and communities were left to grapple with the aftermath of his actions. The legacy of Hopkins' witch hunts lingered long after his disappearance, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked power and superstition. As the war drew to a close and the political landscape shifted, the appetite for witch hunts waned, and with it, Hopkins' influence faded into obscurity. Yet the stories of his brutal methods and the lives they destroyed persisted, echoing through history as cautionary tales. In the years following Hopkins' reign of terror, the witch hunts began to decline, as societal attitudes shifted towards skepticism and rationality. The horrors of the past served as a catalyst for change, prompting calls for reform and a re-evaluation of the justice system. The Enlightenment era, with its emphasis on reason and scientific inquiry, gradually took hold, challenging the superstitions that had fueled the witch hunts. However, the scars left by Hopkins' campaign were not easily erased, and the memory of those dark days endured as a somber reminder of the fragility of reason in the face of fear. The tale of Matthew Hopkins remains a poignant chapter in the history of witch hunts, illustrating the perilous path that lies between fear and justice. Part 2. The Rise of Witchfinder General. In the mid-17th century, amidst the swirling mists of East Anglia, a figure emerged whose name would be etched into the annals of history: Matthew Hopkins, the self-styled Witchfinder General. The landscape of England was marked by upheaval, as the air buzzed with tales of witchcraft and malevolent forces. It was within this atmosphere of unease that Hopkins began his notorious campaign. His rise to prominence was swift, fueled by the widespread belief in witches and the fear that they sowed discord in communities. He was a man of slender build, with piercing eyes that seemed to scrutinize the very soul. His methods, though questionable, found fertile ground in a society eager for explanations for their misfortunes. Hopkins's journey as a witch hunter began in earnest around 1644, when he claimed to have overheard conversations between witches in his own town of Manningtree. These claims set off a chain of events that would see him become a central figure in the witch trials that swept through East Anglia. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Hopkins was not a magistrate or a religious leader, but rather a man who wielded influence through fear and his self-appointed title. His approach was systematic, employing techniques that included the infamous swimming test, where accused witches were bound and thrown into water to see if they would float. Considered a sign of guilt? Such methods were brutal, yet they reflected the era's desperation for certainty amidst chaos. The trials orchestrated by Hopkins were marked by a grim efficiency. He traveled from town to town, often accompanied by his loyal associates, seeking out those he deemed suspicious. The testimonies he gathered were frequently coerced, with confessions extracted under duress. Many accused were women, often vulnerable or on the fringes of society, who found themselves ensnared in a web of accusations that left little room for defense. The hearings were public spectacles, drawing crowds eager to witness the proceedings. For Hopkins, each trial was an opportunity to reinforce his authority and the fear that sustained it. Hopkins' notoriety spread quickly, and with it, the scope of his operations. He was not content with merely identifying witches. He sought to eradicate what he perceived as an insidious threat. His influence extended beyond East Anglia, reaching into neighboring counties where local officials, overwhelmed by the climate of suspicion, welcomed his expertise. The fees he charged for his services were substantial, underscoring the financial motivations intertwined with his crusade. Despite the questionable morality of his methods, many communities saw him as a necessary force in their struggle against perceived evil. The reign of the Witchfinder General was, however, not without its critics. As his campaign intensified, voices of dissent began to emerge. Some questioned the legality and ethics of his practices, pointing to the lack of concrete evidence and the reliance on superstition. In particular, the swimming test drew significant ire, criticized for its inhumanity and the impossible position it placed the accused in. Nevertheless, Hopkins remained resolute, dismissing his detractors as misguided or complicit in the very witchcraft he sought to extinguish. His confidence was unwavering, bolstered by the successes he touted and the fear he instilled. As Hopkins's notoriety grew, so too did the scrutiny of his actions. By 1647, his methods and motivations were under increasing examination by both the public and authorities. The tide of opinion began to turn, as the initial fervor of his witch hunts gave way to a more critical understanding of their impact. The executions and confessions, once seen as necessary purges, began to be viewed in a different light. Hopkins' own demise was shrouded in mystery, with some accounts suggesting he succumbed to illness, while others hinted at a more supernatural retribution. Regardless of the truth, his legacy as the Witchfinder General endured, a stark reminder of the power of fear and the consequences of unchecked authority. As the sun set over the rolling fields of East Anglia, the shadow cast by Matthew Hopkins grew ever longer. His relentless pursuit of alleged witches was marked by a chilling determination that left an indelible mark on the region. Hopkins's tactics were as varied as they were ruthless, often employing a mix of psychological pressure and physical intimidation. He utilized watching, a practice where suspects were kept awake for days, waiting for them to reveal their supposed familiars. This method, coupled with sleep deprivation, led many to confess to crimes they never committed. The atmosphere in these small towns was heavy with anticipation and dread, as communities became entangled in a web of suspicion and fear. Hopkins's operations were not only methodical, but also opportunistic. He capitalized on the existing tensions within communities, exploiting personal vendettas and local disputes. In many cases, accusations were born not from evidence, but from long-standing grievances or envy. Hopkins's presence exacerbated these divisions, as neighbors turned against one another, eager to deflect suspicion from themselves. The social fabric of these communities, once tightly knit, began to unravel under the weight of paranoia. It was a time when mere association with the accused could lead to one's own downfall, creating an environment where trust was a rare commodity. Despite the growing unease, Hopkins continued to find support among certain factions. Some saw him as a savior, a figure who could cleanse their towns of perceived malevolence. In these circles, his reputation was bolstered by the dramatic nature of his trials, which often concluded with public executions. These events were gruesome spectacles, designed to serve as both punishment and deterrent. The crackling of the pyres and the cries of the condemned echoed through the countryside, leaving an imprint on the collective memory of those who witnessed them. For many, these executions were a grim reassurance that justice was being served, however harsh it might be. The financial aspect of Hopkins's witch-hunting endeavors cannot be overlooked. His services came at a cost, and he charged towns for each witch trial conducted. This transactional nature of justice raised questions about his true motivations. Was Hopkins driven by a genuine belief in his mission, or was he primarily seeking personal gain? The substantial fees he demanded contributed to the growing skepticism surrounding his activities. As coffers were drained and communities left in turmoil, the financial burden of his campaigns became increasingly apparent. Over time, the fervor that had initially fueled Hopkins's rise began to wane. The sheer number of accusations and the lack of concrete evidence led some to question the validity of the witch hunts. Prominent figures, including legal authorities and religious leaders, started to voice their concerns. They argued for a return to reason and due process, urging a halt to the rampant hysteria that had gripped the region. This shift in perspective marked the beginning of the end for Hopkins's reign as Witchfinder General. The tide was turning, as the voices of reason slowly began to drown out the cries for vengeance. By the time of his death in 1647, Hopkins's influence had significantly diminished. The witch trials that once spread like wildfire through East Anglia had largely subsided, leaving behind a legacy of fear and devastation. Though Hopkins himself was gone, the scars of his campaign remained, etched into the history of the communities he touched. His story serves as a poignant reminder of the dangers inherent in unchecked power and the human capacity for cruelty when driven by fear. As the mists of East Anglia rolled back, they revealed a landscape forever changed by the actions of a man whose name would be remembered as both infamous and cautionary. Part 3. Methods and Trials of Witch-Finding. In the shadowed corners of 17th century England, Matthew Hopkins emerged as a figure who would leave a lasting mark on the history of witch trials. His methods, both chilling and methodical, were designed to root out suspected witches with a veneer of legitimacy. Hopkins often began his investigations with the backing of local authorities, who were eager to rid their communities of perceived malevolent forces. He claimed to possess a commission from Parliament, though no such official document ever existed. This assertion, however, lent him an air of authority that few dared to challenge. One of Hopkins's most notorious techniques was the swimming test, believing that water, as a pure element, would reject the wicked. Accused individuals were bound and tossed into a body of water. If they floated, it was seen as proof of their guilt. If they sank, they were deemed innocent but often not rescued in time. This cruel test underscored the era's desperate clinging to superstition, revealing a society caught in the grip of fear. Hopkins' reliance on such methods reflected a world where evidence was scarce and belief often overpowered reason. In addition to swimming, Hopkins employed other harsh means to extract confessions. Sleep deprivation was a favored tactic, where suspects were kept awake for days, their exhaustion wearing down resistance and leading to false admissions. This relentless questioning often took place in dimly lit chambers, where shadows danced on the walls, heightening the atmosphere of dread. Hopkins's interrogations were thorough, leaving no room for escape, as he sought the smallest inconsistency to exploit. Such techniques, while effective in producing confessions, were built on a foundation of coercion and manipulation. The trials themselves were grim spectacles, drawing large crowds eager to witness the proceedings. Hopkins would present his findings, and the accused, often bewildered and weary, faced a panel of judges. These trials were marked by their lack of fairness, with little opportunity for the accused to defend themselves. Witnesses were often unreliable, their testimonies colored by fear and local rivalries. The presumption of guilt overshadowed any semblance of justice, as the outcomes were nearly always predetermined. Hopkins's influence spread rapidly, and his methods were adopted by others who sought to emulate his success. His brief but intense campaign resulted in the execution of over 100 individuals, a staggering number for the time. Communities across East Anglia found themselves caught in a whirlwind of accusations, where the boundaries between reality and hysteria blurred. The impact of Hopkins's work was profound, leaving a trail of devastation that echoed through the years. As the fervor of witch hunting began to wane, questions about Hopkins's practices started to surface. Critics pointed to the lack of concrete evidence and the reliance on fear-driven tactics. The legal system slowly moved towards more rational procedures, and the tide of public opinion turned against the brutality of the witch trials. Hopkins's legacy, though marked by infamy, served as a catalyst for change, prompting a re-evaluation of the methods used in the pursuit of justice. His story remains a cautionary tale, reminding us of the dangers inherent in the unchecked pursuit of righteousness. As the fervor of witch trials gradually diminished, the legal landscape in England began to evolve. The harsh methods employed by Matthew Hopkins and his contemporaries drew increasing scrutiny from both legal scholars and the general populace. The public's growing skepticism was fueled by the realization that many accused witches were ordinary individuals caught in a web of fear and superstition. This shift in perception was accompanied by a slow but steady movement toward more evidence-based judicial procedures. The era of Hopkins, with its reliance on intimidation and torture, became a catalyst for reform, prompting calls for a legal system grounded in fairness and rationality. In the years following Hopkins's campaign, the English legal system sought to distance itself from the dark legacy of witch hunting. The courts began to require more substantial evidence in cases of alleged witchcraft, moving away from the flimsy accusations and forced confessions that had characterized earlier trials. This transition was not immediate, but it marked a significant turning point in the pursuit of justice. Legal minds of the time increasingly advocated for the rights of the accused, emphasizing the importance of fair trials and the presumption of innocence. The changes reflected a broader societal shift towards Enlightenment ideals, where reason and logic began to overshadow fear and superstition. Despite these advancements, the shadow of Hopkins's methods lingered, serving as a haunting reminder of the past. Communities that had been torn apart by accusations slowly began to heal, though the scars remained. The stories of those who suffered under Hopkins's reign were passed down through generations, cautionary tales that underscored the dangers of unchecked authority. The witch trials left an indelible mark on the collective memory, shaping the way future generations approached issues of justice and human rights. The legacy of this tumultuous period became a powerful argument for the importance of due process and the protection of individual freedoms. As England moved into the latter half of the 17th century, the tide of public opinion continued to turn against the brutality of witch trials. Intellectuals and writers of the age began to voice their opposition, using their influence to advocate for change. Pamphlets and essays circulated, critiquing the methods of witch hunters and questioning the validity of their claims. This growing discourse contributed to a cultural shift that valued skepticism and critical thinking, paving the way for more progressive attitudes. The decline of witch hunts was emblematic of a broader Enlightenment movement that sought to illuminate the dark corners of ignorance and fear with the light of knowledge and reason. Matthew Hopkins, despite his brief career, left a legacy that resonated far beyond his lifetime. His actions, while rooted in the beliefs of his time, ultimately spurred a re-evaluation of judicial practices and the role of evidence in legal proceedings. The lessons learned from this period became foundational in shaping modern legal principles, emphasizing the need for compassion and justice. The history of witch trials, with all its complexities, serves as a poignant reminder of the human capacity for both fear and progress. It stands as a testament to the enduring struggle between darkness and enlightenment, a narrative that continues to echo through the corridors of history. Part 4. The social and political climate of East Anglia. In the mid-17th century, East Anglia was a landscape marked by rolling fields and quaint villages, yet beneath its serene facade, a complex tapestry of social and political tensions simmered. The English Civil War raged on, tearing apart the very fabric of society. This conflict was not only a battle of armies, but also a clash of ideologies, with royalists and parliamentarians vying for control. Amidst this turmoil, fear and uncertainty spread like the morning mist over the countryside, creating fertile ground for suspicion and paranoia. The war's disruption of daily life left communities fragmented, with traditional structures of authority in disarray. It was in this environment of chaos and distrust that Matthew Hopkins found his calling. The religious upheaval of the time added further layers to the already volatile situation. Puritanism was on the rise, challenging the established Anglican Church and its practices. This shift was not merely theological, but also deeply social, as communities grappled with questions of morality and sin. The Puritans, with their emphasis on piety and purity, often viewed witchcraft as a tangible manifestation of evil in the world. This belief was amplified by the war, which many saw as a divine judgment upon the nation. In this climate, accusations of witchcraft became a tool for settling scores and expressing the anxieties of a people living in constant fear of divine retribution. Economic factors also played a crucial role in shaping the witch hunts that swept through East Anglia. The war had devastated local economies, leading to widespread poverty and hardship. As resources grew scarce, tensions over land and property intensified, with neighbors turning against one another in desperation. Witchcraft accusations often provided a convenient scapegoat for these economic grievances, offering an explanation for misfortunes and a means of redress. The trials themselves became a spectacle, drawing crowds and creating a sense of communal catharsis in the face of shared adversity. Hopkins capitalized on this dynamic, presenting himself as a savior who could root out the sources of evil and restore order to the land. The legal framework of the time further facilitated the spread of witch trials. The 1604 Witchcraft Act had made witchcraft a capital offence, and the chaos of the Civil War meant that local magistrates were often left to enforce the law as they saw fit. This lack of centralized control allowed individuals like Hopkins to wield significant influence, operating with little oversight. The methods he employed, such as the infamous swimming test, were dubious at best, yet they were accepted by a populace eager for swift justice. The legal system, strained by the demands of war, became a tool for legitimizing fear rather than upholding fairness and reason. Community dynamics also played a role in the fervor that gripped East Anglia. In small, tight-knit villages, gossip and rumor could spread rapidly, turning suspicion into certainty. The arrival of a stranger like Hopkins, with his authoritative demeanor and air of expertise, could easily sway public opinion. His presence validated the fears of the villagers, providing a sense of legitimacy to their anxieties. As accusations mounted, the social fabric of these communities began to unravel, with trust eroded and long-standing relationships shattered. The witch hunts thus became a self-perpetuating cycle, fueled by fear and the desire for resolution. Amidst this backdrop, the figure of Matthew Hopkins loomed large, a product of his time and circumstances. His ability to manipulate the social and political climate of East Anglia speaks to the power of fear and superstition in shaping human behavior. Though his reign as Witchfinder General was brief, the impact of his actions resonated far beyond the boundaries of his lifetime. In the stillness of the East Anglian nights, the echoes of those turbulent years linger, a reminder of how easily reason can be overshadowed by the shadows of fear. The social and political climate of East Anglia during the mid-17th century was a cauldron of unrest and transformation. The region, known for its pastoral beauty, was deeply affected by the English Civil War, which had splintered communities and upended traditional norms. In this period of upheaval, the Puritan movement gained momentum, challenging the existing religious order and influencing the cultural landscape. The Puritans' focus on moral purity and their belief in the tangible presence of evil heightened the fear of witchcraft. This fear was further exacerbated by economic hardships, as the war had left many struggling to survive. Land disputes and financial grievances often found an outlet in accusations of witchcraft, with the trials serving as a dark form of social arbitration. The legal atmosphere of the time also played a significant role in the proliferation of witch trials. The Witchcraft Act of 1604, which made witchcraft a capital crime, provided a legal basis for the persecution. However, the chaos of the Civil War meant that local magistrates operated with considerable autonomy, allowing figures like Matthew Hopkins to exert influence with minimal oversight. Hopkins employed questionable methods, such as the infamous swimming test, where the accused were thrown into water to see if they would float, a sign of witchcraft. These practices, though dubious, were accepted by a populace eager for explanations and justice amidst the turmoil. The legal system, strained by war, often prioritized expedience over fairness, turning witch trials into spectacles of fear. The communal dynamics of East Anglia further fueled the witch hunts. In the small villages, where everyone knew each other, rumors could swiftly turn suspicion into conviction. The arrival of an outsider like Hopkins with his self-proclaimed expertise and authoritative presence, lent credence to local fears. His investigations gave villagers a sense of validation, as if their anxieties had been officially recognized. This atmosphere of distrust and paranoia eroded the social fabric, leading to fractured communities where neighbors turned against each other. The witch hunts thus became a self-sustaining cycle, driven by fear and the longing for resolution in uncertain times. Amidst these conditions, Matthew Hopkins emerged as a formidable figure. His ability to exploit the social and political tensions of East Anglia underscores the power of fear in shaping human actions. While his tenure as Witchfinder General was short-lived, the repercussions of his witch-hunting campaigns reverberated long after his death. The trials he conducted left a lasting impact on the region, a testament to the destructive potential of unchecked fear and superstition. In the quiet moments of East Anglia's history, the echoes of those dark days linger, serving as a cautionary tale of how societal anxieties can manifest in harmful and irrational ways. The legacy of Matthew Hopkins is intertwined with the broader context of his time. His actions were not isolated events, but rather reflections of the era's complex interplay of religious fervor, economic strife, and legal ambiguity. The witch hunts he orchestrated were symptomatic of a society grappling with change and uncertainty, where old beliefs clashed with new realities. Despite the passage of centuries, the story of Hopkins and the witch trials remains a poignant reminder of the human tendency to seek scapegoats in times of crisis. The shadows of his influence continue to haunt the annals of history, a symbol of the fragile balance between reason and fear. Part 5. Legacy and Impact of Matthew Hopkins. In the quiet corners of history, Matthew Hopkins leaves a shadowy legacy that lingers in the collective memory of England. His brief but fervent campaign as the self-styled Witchfinder General cast a long pall over the rural landscapes of East Anglia, altering the social fabric of the time. Between 1644 and 1647, Hopkins orchestrated a series of witch trials that resulted in more executions than had been seen in the previous century. This surge in activity was not merely a reflection of personal ambition. It was deeply entwined with the era's tumultuous context, where fear of the unknown intertwined with religious fervor. Hopkins's methods, harsh and unyielding, exploited these fears, leaving a mark that would resonate for generations. Hopkins's impact was felt in the communities he targeted, where the fear of witchcraft spread like wildfire. Villages that had once been tight-knit and peaceful found themselves torn apart by suspicion and accusation. The trials often relied on dubious evidence and coercive methods, such as sleep deprivation and the infamous swimming test, where accused witches were thrown into water to see if they would float, a sign of guilt. These practices, though common in the period, were aggressively promoted by Hopkins, intensifying their use and effect. The social upheaval was profound, as neighbors turned against each other and long-standing relationships crumbled under the weight of fear and paranoia. The legacy of Hopkins extended beyond the immediate chaos of his witch hunts. His actions left a legal and cultural imprint that would influence the handling of witchcraft accusations for years to come. The trials conducted under his watch were marked by a lack of legal representation for the accused and a presumption of guilt, setting a dangerous precedent. This approach contributed to a climate where reason and justice were often overshadowed by superstition and hysteria. While Hopkins's reign as Witchfinder General was short-lived, the echoes of his methods could be felt long after his death in 1647, as communities grappled with the after-effects of his campaigns. Historians view Hopkins's influence as a cautionary tale of how fear and authority can combine to devastating effect. His legacy serves as a reminder of the dangers inherent in unchecked power and the ease with which societal fears can be manipulated. The witch hunts of East Anglia, driven by Hopkins's fervor, underscore the fragility of justice when it is swayed by emotion rather than evidence. Over time, this period became a significant chapter in the history of English witch trials, illustrating the complex interplay of social, religious, and political forces. In the years following Hopkins's death, the fervor he incited began to wane, giving way to a more rational approach to accusations of witchcraft. The Restoration period brought with it a shift in attitudes as society moved towards Enlightenment ideals and a greater emphasis on evidence-based reasoning. The witch hunts gradually subsided, and the legal system began to reflect a more measured approach. Yet the scars left by Hopkins's campaigns were not easily erased, and the communities affected by his actions carried the burden of those years well into the future. Matthew Hopkins remains a figure of infamy, a symbol of a dark chapter in history, where fear overruled reason and justice was a fleeting concept. His legacy is a testament to the power of belief and the human capacity for both cruelty and redemption. As history unfolds, the tale of the Witchfinder General stands as a poignant reminder of the lessons learned from the past, urging us to remain vigilant against the forces of fear and prejudice. As time moved on, the memory of Matthew Hopkins and his witch hunts became ingrained in the cultural consciousness of England. The stories of his exploits, exaggerated over the years, transformed him into a near-mythical figure, representing the dangers of fanaticism and unchecked authority. His actions served as a catalyst for future discussions on justice and due process, influencing the development of legal standards that emphasized the rights of the accused. The echoes of his methods, though diminished, lingered in the collective awareness, serving as a grim reminder of a time when fear held sway over reason. The legal ramifications of Hopkins's campaign were significant. His methods highlighted the urgent need for reform in how accusations of witchcraft were handled. Over time, the judicial system evolved, increasingly demanding tangible evidence and fair trials, a shift that was crucial in moving away from the hysteria that had once gripped the nation. The skepticism that gradually replaced fear helped to dismantle the infrastructure that allowed witch hunts to flourish, paving the way for a more enlightened approach to justice. In literature and art, Hopkins' legacy found new life, inspiring numerous works that explored the themes of power and paranoia. Plays, novels, and films delved into the psychological and societal impacts of his witch hunts, often portraying him as both villain and cautionary figure. These creative interpretations kept the story of the Witchfinder General alive, ensuring that his impact was not forgotten. Through these narratives, the complexities of human nature and the consequences of fear-driven actions were explored, offering insights into the darker aspects of society. The psychological impact of Hopkins' witch hunts on the communities of East Anglia was profound and long-lasting. The fear and mistrust that permeated daily life during his campaigns left emotional scars that took generations to heal. Families that had been torn apart by accusations struggled to rebuild, and the social fabric of villages was forever altered. The lessons learned from this period became a part of the collective wisdom, shaping attitudes towards justice and community cohesion in the years that followed. As modern society reflects on this chapter of history, Hopkins's legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance against the forces of fear and intolerance. The story of the Witchfinder General is a testament to the resilience of communities and the enduring strength of human compassion in the face of adversity. It encourages a continual re-evaluation of how justice is administered and the importance of protecting the vulnerable from the whims of those in power. In the end, Matthew Hopkins's brief but impactful campaign left an indelible mark on history. His actions, driven by a mix of ambition and the prevailing fears of the time, offer lessons that resonate even today. Hopkins himself lived only a short life, dying in 1647 at the age of 27 in the Essex town of Manningtree, where his career had first begun. Contemporary accounts suggest he succumbed to tuberculosis rather than any dramatic downfall, his end quiet in contrast to the storms he had stirred. Within those narrow years, he unleashed a fervor whose echoes lasted far longer. And as we continue to navigate the complexities of human society, the legacy of the Witchfinder General stands as a sobering reminder of the need for empathy, understanding, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. As the echoes of history gently fade, we find ourselves pondering the quiet lessons whispered through time. Hopkins' life, as fleeting as the fever of the witch hunts he led, reminds us of the power of fear and the shadows it can cast over reason. His journey through the misty landscapes of East Anglia, marked by the rustle of ancient trees and the soft murmur of distant streams, speaks to a world caught in the delicate balance between superstition and understanding. The era of the witch hunts, with its flickering candlelight and hushed whispers, invites us to reflect on the nature of belief and the human heart's search for answers in the unknown. It is a reminder of the importance of compassion and the gentle embrace of wisdom over fear. As we drift into the calm embrace of night, let us carry with us a sense of peace and the quiet assurance that understanding and kindness can illuminate even the darkest corners of history. In this tranquil moment, may we find solace in the gentle rhythm of time, guiding us softly into dreams of a world where empathy reigns and shadows are but fleeting guests.